So yeah, we have a learning impact model that we use on multiple levels to measure the impact of training. Again, we're trying to draw a contrast between our tech-powered live experience and the more traditional in-person classroom training. And so we've built a lot of technology that helps us measure in different ways. It's based largely on the 4-level Kirkpatrick model that folks may be familiar with a few additions that I'll explain. So first of all, we care about attendance. You got to get people into class in order to learn anything. Again, that sounds obvious, but traditional training, you don't know who showed up. E-learning, you typically see low engagement rates in single-digit percentages. So we're really proud of this kind of 90% plus program completion kind of stat. Level 1 then would be reaction. Do people actually enjoy the class? And we see people reporting in the mid-90s. This was a good use of their time. Typically, we see average 4.8, 4.9 out of 5 on a smile sheet type evaluation of like, did they enjoy the training? And that's often where training evaluation stops because it's just too hard to do anything more complicated if you're rolling it yourself. But we've built out a measurement suite that's integrated into the platform alongside all of the coordination and scalability you get for the logistics of the class. We actually do a bunch of measurement on the back end as well. Level 2, we survey the participants to understand, what they took away and whether they're, retaining things post-class. And then the biggest emphasis, I would say, the biggest innovation that we have is that 30 or 60 days post-program, we run a survey of the learners, but also a survey of the people that the learners work with. We call it a 180 rather than a 360 because it's typically a manager and their team. But we're tying the questions that we ask specifically to the capabilities that we taught in the cohort-based program and look to see, have they actually shown a behavior change both to themselves, but more importantly to the people that they work with or manage. And we see, again, north of 70, 80% of people saying that they did, or other folks saying that they did, which is really nice. And for us, that's kind of the primary, like, did we change someone's behavior? Because we trust if we did, then it'll have a business impact. But we've recently tried to go even further up the Kirkpatrick scale to level 4, where we look at the dollar value of the performance improvement that we bring. So we ask folks, on a scale of 0 to 100, how much did you improve? The example here shows, an 11% improvement. If we baseline the value of an employee as their salary, and they're a 100K employee just for argument's sake, then that's an $11,000 boost to the business. And of course, really, it's much greater than that. So that's the core of what we do. We have one more level that we look at, almost a level, but it's a really important way that companies should think about measurement is, are my managers of the trainees supporting them? And we've actually seen of the order of a 50% increase in that critical measure of performance improvement if the learner also said, oh yes, my supervisor is supporting me applying the learning. So, a key success factor that we've seen in the metrics is not just learning and accountability, but also bringing in the supervisor of the learners as well to drive behavior change. And the platform has metrics across all these levels for folks to look at. But that's how we think about it.
Awesome. Tom, 2 things jumped out that I love. I didn't know a couple of things that you just mentioned about how y'all do why evaluation. Number 1, totally wholeheartedly agree with level 3 behavior change. I think that's really where kind of the proof is in the pudding. When you start getting into business impact, there can be, a number of things when you talk about team performance or growing revenue. We often find that, like, yes, maybe the learning helped with that, but there are other factors that might have had a bigger impact on that. So I definitely agree with you that, like, really zeroing in on behavior change is critical. And then the other thing I love that you're doing is tracking manager support of the learners and showing that those who had support from their managers are seeing greater outcomes than those who didn't, because it creates that accountability for other managers of the program. We've seen the same thing. I think that's brilliant, the way that you're collecting that as a data point. So I will, again, we want to use most of this time so y'all can hear from Geri and Will, because they're ones that actually on the ground making the case for ROI and behavior change for learning and development. I will quickly go over our model, which is very similar to Hone's learning impact model. Similar to Hone, we're very much influenced by the Kirkpatrick model. But what we've noticed is that it is oftentimes difficult for learning and development leaders to start to unpack specifically what behaviors they want individuals to improve in and how that's going to move the needle for their business. And so we've created this proprietary framework that we call Oddity. It's a unique name for a unique framework. So number one is outcome. So this is kind of speaking to level 4, like you mentioned, Tom, the business impact. So what is the outcome or the business impact that the program's meant to define? And then the first D is really where I think the heavy lifting has to happen, is working with L&D partners to really deconstruct that outcome into key, specific, observable workplace behaviors. So, Kirkpatrick in his book talks about, what do you want managers to do or say? That's usually the behavior change that you're seeking. And so we'll partner with our L&D providers to really unpack that. We have templates of certain kind of behaviors that we've seen that correlate to certain outcomes for the programs that we offer. And so oftentimes that can help as a guide. But that's really where we do a lot of our work up front, is to deconstruct those outcomes into key behaviors. And then once we have that, the next D is design the program. So our coaching programs are, because it's coaching, it's quite customized to, the individual and to the organization. So we will create a learning program that not only, identifies those behaviors or skills that we're going to focus on in the coaching, but also design some of the survey feedback that we collect to validate whether or not people are getting better at these things. I is implement, pretty straightforward. So roll out the program to the participants. And then T is track. So we do check-ins at the beginning of the program, the midpoint, and the end of the program, kind of surveys. These are 5-minute surveys that, similar to you, Tom, not only does the learner fill this out, but also their manager, their direct reports, their peers. So we can get kind of a holistic perspective on these key behaviors or business outcomes that we're looking to drive. We track that, and then we evaluate that. So we'll meet with our customers, go through that dashboard, talk through whether or not this program is actually delivering on the desired behaviors and the business outcomes from the beginning of this acronym. And then the last step is evolving the program. So that could mean expanding to other cohorts. That could mean tweaking some things with the existing cohort. Sometimes things aren't necessarily on track with what they had identified at the outset, or the business has changed and they want to go in a different direction with the coaching. So I had Sarah kind of share this slide. When we break it down with our L&D partners, I think it becomes a lot more sensible. And we use this to kind of track as we roll out any program. We will actually speak to, this is the part of our journey that we're on right now. We're at the implementation phase, or we're at the tracking phase. And we're always anchoring back on, what are those business outcomes that you brought us in to solve? And then what are the key behaviors that are going to help us get there?
Why is it important to be building L&D programs? What are your goals and objectives for your L&D initiatives and the behavior change that they can bring? Perhaps, Geri, we can start with you.
Our objective and kind of our path to home, how about that, was we might get into this more later, but we were listening to our team members and what do you need? What do you want? And what we heard was, career development and investing in us. We went on a bit of a journey, more that historical route that you referred to at the beginning, in terms of what are some of those major leadership development companies and vendors out there, and looking at those different ones. And it was like, somehow we came upon Hone and was like, oh, this is really what we're looking for. Where Hone, I know I sound like I work for Hone, but I promise you I don't. But truly it was that aha moment of finding a platform that had a mix of some of all the different disciplines and philosophies and models, in terms of being able to have some aspects of change management, some of those like things that you see from Center for Creative Leadership in terms of the SBI model and feedback and conflict resolution. And so this was a really good fit for how can we bring some career development, demonstrate that we're investing in our team members with a platform that has a very wide degree of courses and catalog material, as opposed to that approach of going to this vendor for this thing, this vendor for this thing, this vendor for this thing. And so I really appreciate that about Hone, and that really did help us move towards what we were trying to accomplish in terms of what we heard our team members asking for.
That's great to hear. No, thanks, Geri. We're thrilled with the partnership and the work that we've done together. So thank you for that. And thanks for calling out the catalog. That's certainly something that we set out to do as well. So we built about 80 different modules across topics like manager basics, advanced management, early executive leadership, individual contributor productivity, organization influence, and then multiple curricula in diversity, equity, inclusion. So we really are trying to help folks identify what they need and then in a modular way pull it together to meet their goals. So thanks for calling that out. Given the topic is ROI, it would be great if you could share some of the measures of success that you were looking at for the program and work together.
I really love that you brought up Hone's model in terms of certainly, those first couple of weeks you're looking for attendance and engagement, and are people even taking the class and participating? I think for a little bit of background, we went into our Hone partnership with kind of two initiatives. One was a cohort for people managers, and another was access for our entire agency to be able to take any classes on the platform. Was that initial metric of who's attending, is there any engagement? But I think more importantly, what were those behavior changes that you have seen? And so the higher level up into that model. So I have a couple of anecdotes I want to share. One is just that genuine people taking classes and sharing it back out. And then, of course, that creates the snowball effect of I saw Tom take this class. He posted about it in we use Microsoft Teams, and we have this really fun channel called Hone Your Own Way. And so Tom might come out there. This truly did happen just a couple of weeks ago. Someone said, I took the mindfulness at work class. Here are some takeaways. And then that creates this organic engagement of, man, that sounds awesome. I want to take that class too. I just signed up. And that shows so many different things on that level. And I'm sure, Tom, you're like, yes, we crushed that model. But that shows not only, the effectiveness, the engagement, behaviors are changing. People have actionable takeaways that they're leveraging from these courses. And then we also have this cohort of people managers who went through multiple weeks of the people management cohort. And one of the stories I like to share from that is we had a couple of leaders in the cohort who had a conflict. In working through this conflict, they kind of did wait a minute, we took this Hone class. I know that I am participating in this island mentality. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you'll just have to sign up to Hone and go take the classes. But they knew that. But what I mean by that in terms of island mentality was that I am focused on what is happening to me, only to me, and not acknowledging what are those internal and external pressures that this other person is experiencing that is directly involved in this conflict that is happening right now. And when they took that moment to kind of leverage that Hone training, they were able to work through and find some middle ground in terms of that conflict. And that is that qualitative behavior changes that we would like to see, that they were able to work through conflict and find success from learnings through Hone.
What your goals were for your learning program and behavior change.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity. So, for one of the biggest drivers for us, excuse me, in pursuing an L&D program, we went with Lingo Live was to enable our employees in an environment of rapid growth. So, some background. Our company more or less tripled in size over the past several years, and so the result of that is had lots of people taking on more and more responsibility. Increasing their roles, their scope. Individual contributors becoming group leads and managers, managers becoming directors, and so on. That was my role at the time, actually, or situation when I went through the training. And so the idea was to support this growth by getting each person the individual support that they needed. And that was really the reason that Lingo Live's approach was kind of ideal for us. You know, it's really this individual coaching, kind of met each person where they were, you know, in their own journey, because we've all got different backgrounds and skill sets and capabilities. And so rather than having like a kind of a textbook curriculum classroom approach, you know, everyone's getting exactly what they need, kind of when they need it. And I like to hear some of Geri's stories, because honestly, a lot of the coaching was really kind of this immediacy of, you know, what is this person working on? You know, what issue are they going through? And a lot of the coaching sessions actually ended up being like how to solve, you know, what was going on. Worked really well for us. I'd like to give one short example. We had a very strong individual technical contributor that was going through the training. So a PhD physicist who had been put in charge of 2 teams, and then suddenly responsible for running a team of engineers and a prototype shop. And so the type of work was suddenly drastically different. There's a large amount of operational work required to actually get things done in a kind of coordinated way, instead of just focusing on your own tasks. You know, everything from kind of machining, assembly, field work, testing, analysis, and all this stuff was kind of going on, you know, simultaneously, but coordinated, and it required really an entirely different skill set. Go Live training supported her during this transition time. And on the other side of that, she was able to implement quite an elegant system of managing this complicated workflow, and to speak to that success, that same system has now been mirrored in our overseas facilities quite well. So that was an example of, you know, someone who was in a new situation, getting the support that they needed, and kind of having a good result. So another situation where some of us may be familiar with, I myself was, you know, in sink or swim situations. At Ember Kinetics, we wanted to, again, enable people to be successful, and that, I think, has worked quite well for us.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And you hear that story so often when someone's a strong individual contributor in a technical area, like engineering or software engineering, or even sales and marketing, and then they get the promotion given that the company's growing and they've earned it. But it is a completely new skill set, like you say, and it's great that you're able to support her and you know, the team more broadly with that.
And I know we talked about this when we kind of met in our practice round, Geri and Will, but I think the elephant in the room with all this stuff is like, how do you get buy-in? There are other, you know, executive sponsors who have to sign off on this. So there's kind of how do you get the executive team, CEO bought in to investing in this? And then even when you do that, then how do you get participation in the program? How do you get people to see what's in it for them? So if you could speak to kind of what that looked like either with Hone and Lingo Live respectively, or just in general, kind of what that looks like.
I love that we kind of have a bit of a non-traditional answer, and that is, well, how about number one is executive sponsorship? And I feel like that's so kind of like flippant and easy to say. But if you look at kind of the discipline of change management and, you know, how do projects become successful or why do they fail? One of the pillars is executive sponsorship and support. And we're fortunate at NextPR that, yeah, sure, I'm the COO, and our CEO, Heather, we're the ones who discovered Hone, and we're really interested in bringing Hone to our agency. But the part 2 to that is the reason why we discovered Hone is because we do every year, the 2 of us sit down and we do what we call career combos. Other companies call them stay interviews. And we ask the questions that matter. What do you want to focus on? What are your goals this year? But more importantly, what would make you leave the agency? And the answer that we heard was, if I feel stagnant, if I feel like I'm not growing, if I don't feel like I'm invested in. And one of the part of that was I don't feel like I'm being invested in my career growth. Where are our trainings? I thought we were going to get more people management training. It's about listening and then making those investments in our team. And then I think, Tyler, the other part to that then is like, so then how did you get everyone on board? So certainly the easy answer is yes, and executive sponsorship. When you see myself and Heather super excited about a new platform, that certainly makes you interested as well. But then also the people starting to take it and share that back out, and how excited they were about the classes is the other part of that. And we have just been able to create that snowball effect or domino effect of that excitement around it. And I think also just seeing us, I did see a Q&A question in terms of like, well, what about the senior leaders? How did you get them involved? Part of that was they were part of the people management cohort, so they were just involved. But then I think that's where it depends on the materials. If the class isn't good, then you failed. Thankfully for us, people really have liked the facilitators, and so and they like that model of the breakout rooms and sharing and being able to talk about things, and that is what has continued people to take the classes and want to continue that. Don't forget about the ROI of retention and replacement costs. And you just really cannot underestimate people feeling like A, you hear them, and B, feeling invested in. And then certainly, yeah, you get the returns on the investment in terms of like, I took this class and I liked it, but just the baseline of feeling invested and invested in my career development. And I mean, it costs 1.5 to 2 times more to replace someone. And, by and large, people aren't leaving because of bigger, better salaries. They're mostly leaving because some type of dissatisfaction with their current employer or their manager or something like that. So if you put and that's hard to put in a cost benefit analysis. That's those intangibles that you kind of just have to put at the bottom of the spreadsheet, unfortunately.
Again, for us, our initial top level buy-in for the first cohort was driven by our growth. As I think I mentioned earlier, we wanted to retain a lot of the early folks while at the same time pushing them to do more and more stuff. And so I think, that drove the buy-in for the first cohort. But we have had 2 cohorts thus far, and I think internal support for the second cohort was then largely driven by the success from the first one. We were seeing results and changes and growth from those that had gone through it. To personalize it a bit, I myself took part in the first cohort and have now a very real understanding, kind of the benefit of the personalized leadership coaching and its impact on performance and capability, and quite simply being prepared, for a more complex role. The first is the concept of wicked problems and the guidance around how to manage people, projects, and resources with that perspective shift. I encourage you all to look up that concept. It's really quite fascinating, and it was kind of transformative for me. And the second is how to make tough decisions by relying on kind of foundational values. And so again, both of those ideas were introduced to me at the right time and have really stayed with me ever since. A very special shout out to my former coach if she's listening. And then one final thought around the participation that we've had. This really helped us kind of maximize our benefit here at Amber Kinetics. We had a large number of candidates for the program. In some sense, it kind of made it difficult to choose, who got to participate. Budgeted only for so many people. But what was great, though, was that in a couple of instances where we had some low engagement from our folks, for whatever reason, we were able to swap in other employees who were kind of standing there ready and waiting, excited for the training. And so, this training's really had a huge impact on our company. We see it as critical to our long-term success to continue to reinvest in our team.
How do you create a culture of impact and learning more broadly than these programs? And then, we've heard a little bit of this already, but how did it reverberate across the organization to reinforce that as you did these programs? And, any linkage that you can see to company values or being able to live values of growth and learning even greater?
First off, I love talking about our company culture. We love it. For us, we have 4 principles, and I won't use this webinar to talk about our principles, but one of them is continuously curious. And every year we gamify our principles. When we brought in home, we were able to weave that into the gamification of our principles, and encouraging people to do that, share on the Hone Your Own Way channel what classes that you've taken and what were your key takeaways, and you can check that off on the punch card for sharing some learnings. And I think as a result of our principles having been gamified over the years, heavily encouraging being continuously curious, having just a constant learning model in place. We also have a standing meeting on Thursdays. It's called Thinking Thursday. And anyone can add things to the agenda. And at this point, we do have that just baked into the culture of like, hey, I think that's a good topic for Thinking Thursday, whatever that is. Whether you took a home class or you just learned something new, within our industry that you want to share with everyone in the agency. And so that extends out to bringing, external home learnings back into our agency and our culture. I can feel people being like, well, that's great for you. I don't know how you did that, but fantastic for you. But genuinely, there is that thread of gaining and sharing knowledge that I think I would heavily encourage companies to try to get that into your culture of is that sharing back out. And then that's what makes you want to continue to learn so that you can participate in almost this kind of like peer influenced, organic learning and sharing model that we have.
And I love the branding of Hone Your Own Way and then Thinking Thursday.
Yes.
Maybe we shouldn't be surprised that that's coming from a PR agency. So congrats. But you mentioned gamification a few times.
Yes.
Is there anything more you can say? Are there points? Like, how does that gamification actually work?
We are on, I think, year 5 of kind of gamifying our principles. We've done everything from bingo to tic-tac-toe to one year we kind of did like Candyland, and it wasn't a failure, but it was hard because we wouldn't let you skip on the board. And if you can't jump around, it took you all year to try to finish your Candyland board. The last 2 years, we've gone a different route, and we have a punch card for each principle, and we basically have the punch card for 2 months of each principle, and you get to choose from 20 items, and you only have to check off 10 of those 20. So more accessible, and then there are smaller prizes along the way. That was another lesson learned. We used to just have this like one big grand prize at the end of the year. So there's some smaller prizes throughout the year, and then anyone who finishes all 4 cards, you get your card gets put into. We truly have, I wish I could take my screen and roll it out to show you. We have a giant wheel, and your name gets put in this giant wheel, and we draw someone at the end of the year.
That's amazing. So creative. And, the gamification stuff, when designed right, like you say, with kind of intermediate rewards and achievable goals for people, it really works. So great to see that in action. Talking about infusing learning in the broader culture and keeping the learning going.
Sure. I just want to say first that, Geri, your company sounds fun. It sounds like really fun.
I hope we sound fun. We are fun. You spend a lot of time with your coworkers, and you might as well try to have some fun while you're at it.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
From our perspective about kind of our learning philosophy, one of the things that we've had a lot of success with is we call them lunch and learns. They're basically seminars that we have periodically. The content is created internally. Anyone can contribute, and the topics range from technical product discussions to explanations of our internal processes to kind of everything in between. It's really broad, almost curated spectrum of information. And it serves a couple different purposes. One is to just kind of spread knowledge around, institutional knowledge, instead of saying, hey, go talk to someone about this thing. It's an opportunity for, say, someone in the procurement process to, teach people how to successfully use it, right? And we've had good success with capturing those presentations. We record them and put them up on a wiki page. And it's become this reference material that we use to point to, again, for training, onboarding new hires. So it's really accelerated ramping people up when they first start at our company. And it can also be kind of fun. And the other benefit is, people that don't get a lot of chance to present their work, get that opportunity too. So it's kind of deviously productive in a lot of ways.
Deviously productive. I haven't heard that phrase before. That's great. Awesome. Well, this is perfect timing. We usually do these webinars like once a month, and we never get to all the questions, or if we do, we're running over on time. We've gotten all of our questions, and we've got just about the 15 minutes that we set aside for Q&A. So great job. Thank you, panelists, for staying on time here and for sharing such great insights. So we want to make sure that we're addressing your questions. I know some of these questions we've kind of answered as we go here. I've seen some of you use the raise hand feature. If you could add to the Q&A, because we can't kind of like turn the audio on for you, just add your question to the Q&A and we'll address them as they come in. So Tom, the first one is for you, and you let me know if you want to answer that live or follow up with Stacy. She asks, the tracking and stats you gave, are those applicable only to the core program or also to the membership program?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me first clarify what the difference is. Our core programs are the cohort-based continuous learning experiences that I described at the start of the webinar. So that is, 10, 20 people every week together with the same coach moving through a curriculum of, say, Manager 101. It's an incredibly effective way to learn. And there's some follow-up beyond that and the measurement piece. And that's what those stats referred to. It was purely the core program. The membership offering is actually like our second product. And the idea there, and Geri referred to it earlier, is that think of it like Peloton for corporate training. So we're just running classes a few times a day, live with an instructor, and the learners themselves get to choose which classes they go to. So the mindfulness at work class was mentioned in the Hone Your Way Slack channel at NextPR, and then someone who also has membership access can just go take that class the next time it's run, probably in a week or two. More of an individualized experience. We actually see the scores be higher for the folks that take membership classes, slightly higher, because I think they're picking it themselves. It's something that they genuinely need or want individually. But we haven't strung those together into a cohort program, and so we don't do the same degree of membership. It's more an engagement play to support a broader base of employees. So what you'll see, and this is what Geri did with the team, is that you'll take a select cohort of managers to go through the cohort experience, that kind of premium measured experience. And then for the rest of the company, say your ICs, give them access to membership, and so they can take the classes that they want or need. So great question. Thank you for that.
It's a broad question. I think it's related to someone else's question. I think I could speak to how we do this at Lingolab, because again, I said this before, this is really the real work that our team does to codify the program specifically. And then maybe, Tom, if you want to share a little bit more about how do you determine key skill areas you're going to focus on with certain cohorts. If you remember that kind of oddity slide I shared, how we determine the key skill areas that we're going to focus on, which again is that first D, deconstruct the business outcome into key behaviors, is it takes work. And it's not just someone from our sales team who's bringing that client in, but oftentimes we will bring in people from a department we call program success. So this could be someone like Alyssa Conley, who's a member of the team, and I think is on the webinar here today, who works on a lot of the program design side, or our VP of coaching, Jen Miller, where we'll actually come in to really help better understand, on the ground, what are some of the things that your managers are doing or saying that is not helping to serve this business outcome that we've determined. And based on that, sometimes, again, the answer can be very clear. People have a good finger on the pulse because they've done maybe, Culture Amp employee engagement surveys, or they've done extensive 360s where they've been able to collect feedback from these folks. And sometimes they even have leadership competencies that have been built that are in alignment with their company values, where they can really clearly define what those key behaviors or skills are. But if that's not you, I would say don't worry, because the vast majority of people don't have that. They know there's an issue. They know that there's some key skills lacking, but they cannot quickly and clearly articulate what are those key behaviors, what are those key skills. And so the benefit we have is from the expertise of folks like Alyssa and Jen, as well as the skills catalogs that we built out. We can share with them, this is what we've seen in our experience. Do any of these resonate with you? And using that, some of these, L&D partners can kind of pick and choose, like, yes, for our language coaching product, yes, people speaking up in meetings or having difficulty summarizing their ideas. Like, that is a very key behavior that I wouldn't have been able to come up with on my own. But when I see it in your skills catalog, that definitely resonates. Or on the management side, things like our emotional intelligence category, that gets a lot of nodding heads saying, yeah, being open, being resilient, building their self-awareness. I think that, again, couldn't quite put my finger on it, but that is the key skills that we want to focus on. And so then we use that kind of agreement to really customize the program to focusing on those key skills. But it is not a simple process. It does take some work up front, but the beauty of it is if you do that work, again, remember that kind of oddity framework, you do that work, then you're always anchored on the right things that really drive ROI for this organization. We understand what the business outcomes are that you're trying to achieve. We've deconstructed those into very key behaviors. And now we are coaching people to get better at those behaviors, and we're providing data to validate whether or not we are helping you with this. And if we're not, we need to shift gears. We need to improve some things in the program. And so that way there's shared accountability between the L&D partner and between us to say, what are the skills? Sure, but why do they matter? What is the impact that this is supposed to be having on your organization?
What we do at home is quite similar, actually. We have a team of learning strategists who are ex-learning leaders. Anna Maria is on this call, who worked with Geri, I believe. And they do the same thing. Let's take the input, whether it's the Culture Amp, culture survey, or senior leadership assessment, capability model that the team has built, and then we map that to our classes or modules. As Tyler said, that's not everybody. Oftentimes there is a bit more discovery that happens, and so we can use our learning strategy team and the pattern matching that we've got from other partners that we've worked with to say this is typically, at this stage with these issues, what we would recommend deploying. And then at the end of the program, when we do that learning assessment to give all of those, level 1, 2, 3, 4 learning measurement analyses, we also ask about where they want to go next, right? And so based on our capabilities, it's a capability assessment of the learners at the back end of the program, where we're asking, which of these capabilities do you want to get better at? Coaching versus delegation, versus career growth for your team. And then those map to specific skills, to Tyler's point around behaviors. And each of those skills then maps to a class. And so we can come back to phase 2 with our partners, our clients, saying, look, we've hit the core needs up front. Now we're hearing from the learners that they want to go in these different directions. So let's put these modules or make these modules available for the 201 experience. So yeah, adding in some of the data bottoms up as well helps to clarify that.
Great. And the last question is, again, perfect timing with just a few. We're working with a limited budget, and some of these examples seem to apply to other sectors. All our staff have access to LinkedIn Learning. but we are on our own for developing an L&D track and metrics, accountability, et cetera. So I guess any advice you'd have for someone like this person who is, quote, on their own for developing an L&D track and metrics and accountability?
I can take the first whack at it. So no, I haven't worked with any local governments, but in a former career, I certainly worked in a more I worked in the financial services industry, more restrictive, more related to government regulations, et cetera. And, you know, in terms of my familiarity with the Hone platform and the catalog, we aren't talking about those skills that cross any sector. And I do know and understand from my former life in terms of like data privacy, things like that you need to consider. And, you know, even just the nervousness of providing a vendor with your email addresses and things like that. So I don't want to negate that you kind of have to not only roll your own, but have those data privacy concerns. But I would love to think, especially now, let's put Tom on the spot. They would be happy to work with you and mitigate those type of concerns, as well as on the budget side of things. Hone definitely worked with us to fine tune like the program that we wanted that fit our budget.
Yeah, no, thanks for that call out, Geri. I would just add, you know, whether it's local government or anybody else, budgets are tight right now, and totally get that. Where we're seeing folks come to Hone is as much replacing existing budget, replacing existing vendors with us. And so I know LinkedIn Learning was mentioned. I would just encourage you to go look at the usage and see if you're getting ROI on that budget. If you've already got the budget, and it could be used elsewhere for high ROI and engagement.
If I could just comment quickly, you know, we definitely had a training budget going into this, kind of both of our cohorts, and which required us to be selective about who went through each one. So it wasn't like we could just get it for everyone right away. And then, you know, again, our kind of culture of building up internal training. So you can also, you know, have mentorship and have kind of people train internally as well. So.
Thank you all so much. Special thanks, Geri and Will, for being here and sharing not only your experience with Hone and Lingo Live, but also kind of your organizations and how you build that culture of learning and development. So we really appreciate it.